Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is from Korea, and it's Failan, or Failan, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, from 2001. This is a DVD Region 5, but it's got English subtitles that are pretty good. There's some little bits of dialogue that you feel aren't translated, but on the whole, the subtitles are pretty good. This stars superstar Choi Min-Shik and Cecelia Cheung. It's directed by Song, who's done about 6 features, including a Korean reboot of John Woo's A Better Tomorrow, which I haven't seen. It's based on a novel by Hiro Asada. And the reason I'm doing a random review is because I still haven't decided how to rate the film. It's a bit schizophrenic. The poster art, which I've included in the background, is completely erroneous, I feel. It's kind of billed as a love story, but it's not really. The basic premise is Failan, played by Cecelia Cheung, both her parents die, so she comes to Korea from China looking for work, and she's pretty much duped by this fake marriage agency that marries her to Kang Ye, who's Choi Min-Sik's character, as a pretense to essentially get her citizenship and to get her work, even though the two of them have never met. So that's one thread of it. The other thread is Choi Min-Shik, who plays a scumbag who has just got out of prison for selling pornography to teenagers. And this is where I kind of have a problem with the film. It's funny, I recently did my first episode of the Dardenne brothers films, The Promise. And again, there's a character in there, the father, who does bad things. He exploits immigrants to get money. But because we know he's doing it because he wants to buy a house so he can live with his son, he's doing it for the love of his son. So even though he does bad things, from a human perspective, we can kind of see how he justifies that. So, you know, he's not a complete scumbag in our eyes, even though he does scumbaggy things. Whereas Choi Min-Sik's character in this, he is petulant, he is aggressive all the time, he gets into fights, he treats people terribly, and for me it's just a very difficult character to kind of, well, you certainly don't root for him, but even to follow his story at times is a bit difficult because he just is such a kind of unrepentant kind of scumbag. Now things change later in the film, but to get to that point I think at times is quite difficult. So Failan goes to a small fishing town, she works really hard, she has this kind of fake information about her husband, she has a nice picture, and of course Choi Min-Sik's in wearing a cravat, which obviously he doesn't wear in his real life. He kind of just wears like a baseball bomber jacket and is basically well, he's a scumbag. There's another thread where his boss in the gang, who, strangely enough, is another scumbag and has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. He beats up women and just pretty much beats up anybody he sees. I'm not really sure why anybody would want to work for him, but never mind. And he gets into a fight one night, and Choi Min-Sik's character helps bail him out, but they end up killing this guy, and the boss wants Choi Min-Sik to take the fall for it and do prison time for it. And Choi Min-Sik's dream, very much like Don Amici and Things Change by David Mamet, is to just go back to his hometown, get a fishing boat, but he's kind of trapped in this world of petty crime and just being a scumbag. I don't know, this might be my record for saying the word scumbag in a random review, but hey ho. So you have these kind of three things going on during the film at the same time. It's 116 minutes, which again is another problem because it's too long. But this might sound like a negative review, but it is actually a good film. It's just whether I'm struggling to rate it, whether it's a 3 or a 4. And again, it's pretty much how much you can tolerate Choi Min-Sik's character for 3/4 of the film. Because he only changes later in the film. Now I'm going to go into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the film, I would still recommend it. One, it's a Korean film, so you kind of know the kind of quality you're going to get. It is well acted, even though Choi Min-Sik's character goes too far. But it's well acted. Cecelia Cheung's wonderful. There's an old woman who Failan rents a room for, who's wonderful because she obviously really likes Failan, how hard she works. The supporting cast is really good. So it is a good film and you should check it out. I just wouldn't go in thinking that it's like a romantic comedy the way some of the poster art, whichever direction it is, that one, some of the poster art would make you think it's this romantic comedy. It's not. It is dark, it's pretty bleak, but it's still well worth checking out. And again, you can tell me in the comments below if you have seen it, whether I'm being a little bit too harsh on Choi Min-Sik's character, or whether you found his character a little bit too unlikable or too impenetrable to actually kind of be happy following his arc throughout the film. So again, please let me know in the comments below if you've seen Failan before and what you think of it. And I'm now going to go into spoiler territory. So the film only really kind of takes off in a different direction when Choi Min-Sik's character receives news that his wife has died, because we see scenes where Failan's like coughing up blood, and she's obviously not well. She ends up being in debt to this guy in the fishing town. So the wife that he's never met, the police come to his door, and of course he thinks the police have come to his door for the fight where the guy gets killed. But he hears his wife, who he's never met obviously, has died. He's seen pictures of her. So he kind of has to go and identify the body. And again, his friends and the people in kind of the fishing town, or the people who know what's going on, are like, oh yeah, you're such a great actor, which again makes him mad and gets into more fights and punches and kicks people and beats people up, because on some level he has actually been affected by this. He goes to the fishing town, and of course the old woman To be fair, I don't, she's not that old. She's probably just in her like her 50s or 60s. You know, she gives him grief about being Failan's husband, and you know, there's a whole deal with the scarf. That's the only thing that Failan had that she gave to him, even though he didn't. It was just something that somebody else bought for her under the guise that her husband bought it for her. You know, she writes beautiful letters to him, and at some point the penny drops, and he actually is affected by this. But it's only really when he goes to the fishing town. He has her ashes, and the landlady or whoever rented Failan the room is kind of giving him grief about why he hasn't seen her, and it's only at that point that something kind of stirs inside him. But again, one of the things with the film is, do you actually buy that because he is such a scumbag? I said it again. That you perhaps have to go a little bit of suspension of disbelief that he's moved by this finally, after being like immune to everything else in the film. And then at the end of the film, he finds a video that was taken almost like not an audition to your husband or a message to your husband, that was shot on the beach in the fishing town, which is actually quite moving, and Choi Min-Sik's character is actually moved, and at that point you actually do see him as a human being, and not just this angry ball of hate that he's been for the whole film. But again, does that ring true? We're not sure, but he's had this revelation, and he tells his boss that he's not going to go to prison for him because he just wants to make a break and go back to his hometown and get a boat and just fish. But obviously that doesn't work out, so you have the wonderful scene where he's watching the video of her kind of singing to her husband that she's never met, who isn't really her husband, well, is legally, and he's actually getting emotional about it for the first time in the whole film, and then he gets garroted by obviously somebody who's working for his boss because he needs to take the fall so the boss doesn't go to prison. So it ends with a lovely scene of him being a human being for the first time, actually emoting, being emotional, actually crying over this woman that he never really met, and it was only when she's dead, his fake wife, that he's actually again become a human, and he gets garroted. It's a wonderful scene, and then of course during the struggle, the box, the container with her ashes gets spilled on the floor, and it's just a wonderfully bleak ending. I mean, I'm usually a fan of bleak endings, but this one was pretty bleak. Just the shot of her ashes being literally spilt on the floor as he's getting garroted. So again, a strange little film in the sense of how it's marketed. I think it's marketed as a love story, as almost like a romantic story, but I just found it to be quite dark, with a really bleak ending. It does have really good performances, could have been shorter, and I do have a bit of a problem with Choi Min-Sik's character. He's just, for me anyway, he's just too much of a scumbag. To have just that short bit of redemption near the end of the film, I'm not sure rings that true, but it's certainly well worth your time if you can get past his character, and an interesting film. So thanks very much for watching all the way through if you've seen Failan. But again, let me know what you think of it. Maybe I've taken it the wrong way. and hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.